welcome to the channel and thanks for joining me. So we're going to take a look today at the Sanyo M-GP27, and this one dates from the mid to late 80s, around 1988 I believe, and a relatively simple personal cassette player with a 3-band EQ, and it's got 4 transport buttons there, just to play, stop, fast forward, rewind, single volume slider there, or potentiometer, and a single headphone outlet. Now this one took over really, I guess, from the made in Singapore version, which is this one here, and this is the M-GP24, and again, no radio, just a cassette player with a 3-band EQ. Do check out the video on that one because I've recently restored this particular example. So this particular example has been described as not working insofar as the tape either plays slowly or not at all. So an intermittent issue like that, I would imagine, is probably a loose or slipping belt. Obviously fairly typical of something of this age, what, 40 years old or more. So I think what we'll do is just try out and see if that is actually the case. So the first thing we'll do is put some batteries in, and it's only a 3-volt one, this one, so two batteries, and they will go in like so. And there's your 3 volts. So we'll just press play and see what happens first. Yep, you can see it is actually playing. So let's put a tape in now and see if it works now. Oh, there you go. It's trying to. Yeah, it's trying to work, but you can hear the motor trying to spin up there, and it's really not turning the reels very well. So I'm imagining the extra weight of the tape, and we just haven't got the torque through the belt. So I imagine the belt's slipping. So just before we do anything else though, irrespective of that, I just want to check whether or not both of the speakers actually work. I'll just stop that there. So you may have noticed I was just wiggling the volume pot there. When I first plugged these in just now, you probably just heard that only one speaker was working, and this one was actually inoperative. So just by working the volume pot, it was quite crackly, and I think the connection there's something to do with this channel that's not working through this volume pot, so probably a dirty potentiometer. So always worth checking that first, because obviously while we're in there to change the belts, we should also be giving the thing just a general quick looking over, lubricate various parts that may need it, and indeed cleaning the switches and stuff. So now that we know that the belt's slipping and we've got a dirty potentiometer, let's just crack it open. So the first thing we'll do is, well, first I'll remove the tape, and we'll get the batteries out. And as is typical for these particular units, there's normally just 3 or 4 screws on the back of these Sanyo units. This particular one just got 1 in each corner, so we'll get those out now. And just like that, we're in the position to remove the back cover, like so. And there we go. So let's just zoom in. And we can now see the belt, which, yeah, does feel rather loose. So I'm tempted now to actually put the batteries back in, and let's just see what's going on with this belt, shall we? So we'll drop the batteries in and press play. Yeah, and we're just replicating the sound that we actually had just now, where the tape was spinning, but the belt wasn't really. I'm just going to put a little witness mark on the motor there, on the little motor pulley, and one just on there, and we'll see what's happening. Okay, so at the moment, both of them are turning nicely. And if I put a tape in now, we should find, hopefully, that the weight of the tape now won't actually turn turn the flywheel. So let's just watch what happens. Well, actually, it is working now. Of course, it was intermittent just now. Yeah, it's not pulling it fast enough. So I expect what's happening. Yeah, the merest little touch, the merest little bit of friction. Look, and it's not really spinning, but you can see that this one still is. And so there we go. The motor itself requires quite a bit of resistance to stop it or to slow it down. So there's nothing wrong with the motor torque. It literally is just about slipping. So that's great. There we go. So first thing we'll do is go and find a belt of the same size, actually the correct size, because this one's gone slightly large now. And we'll also just put some switch cleaner into the potentiometer there, which hopefully will free up the other channel so we can hear it properly in stereo. So I'll put some switch cleaner into the volume pot first. Shouldn't need very much. Just spray that in there, just work that back and forth a few times to the full extent of motion. And that should be enough. We'll try it in a moment. Actually, we can try it now while we're here. So we press play and volume to minimum to start with. That's working. And that one's working. Good. So we've solved that problem, but you can blatantly hear that the tape is running way too slow. So we're not going to hit any content matches with that. That's for sure. Good stuff. So we've fixed that little problem. Let's go and change the belt. Removing the belt's going to be as easy as this. And I've seen ones that are more deformed than that, to be honest. You can see where it's got a slight pinch point over the motor pulley there, but actually I've seen a lot worse. I think it's probably just stretched out too much. It's lost its elasticity and just needs a slightly tighter, fresher belt putting on. And so with the motor off, actually there are a couple of little things you don't have to do now, but I quite like to do if I get the chance. Firstly, I'm just going to draw a little drop of oil, very light machine oil, and literally pipette one little drop of oil onto the motor, onto the spindle, or maybe even another drop for good measure. No need to flood it at all, because what you don't want to do is contaminate the surface of the actual belt. So we'll go with some isopropyl alcohol anyway and clean that in a second, because that's the next stage. But I can hear that that's now running slightly quieter than it was, which is great. So next thing we're just going to do is run some isopropyl alcohol around the bearing surfaces. Now they don't actually look that dirty, to be honest, but because the belt's been slipping for so long, it's never a bad idea just to work a little bit of isopropyl alcohol into the pulley surfaces for the belt, so you've got a nice fresh surface for the new belt to bite onto. So we'll do that and do the same onto the motor pulley. And I'm doing that just by pressing the motor slightly whilst we do that. And I'll just put another drop in there now. There we go. Marvellous. And whilst I'm at it, just clean any residue from the oil that we put on. There we go, so that's good to go. So I've now just sourced another belt, so we can get that one on. And it should be a simple process of just fitting it over the two pulleys and we'll be good to go. So I'm just going to hook this over the motor pulley and onto the flywheel, like so. And it being a square belt, we'll just spin it by hand a few times until it settles. So we'll just try the functions real quick. So play, fast forward, rewind. Good. Okay, right, let's get the tape in and try that. Okay, let's just try a tape in here as well. Make sure it's running correctly. And we'll put some headphones in for the speakers. I know these batteries aren't the best, but they should still do the job. So I've just set up 3 volts DC into the machine, and well, that's not worked very well at all, has it? So we'll delve even deeper. As much like the previous model, there's likely to be a secondary belt in there. I thought this one was geared, but it may well be driven by a belt. So we'll just delve a bit deeper. So we've got one screw. We've got one screw that holds the board down. We've got another screw just here, which holds the earthing point onto the motor. And with that, he says, okay, so we'll remove this bit of tape as well. And that should allow us more access, hopefully, to see what's going on inside. And sure enough, it looks like there's a belt buried underneath there, so we may need to get that out also. Now we are tethered a bit by the graphic equalizer ribbon there, which is actually, instead of being a multi-plug, as part of the size reduction thing, I would imagine, that's actually soldered on. So we've got half a dozen to desolder there if we choose, or indeed there are a couple to the motor just there, and then the head as well. So we've got potentially we've got 4 cables plus the sleeve. So we've got 5 cables to desolder that way, or 5 or 6 that way as well. But I think if we're careful, we can actually just move this out of the way, because we are sort of landlocked at the moment by this ribbon on to the door, that side for the equalizer, and these ones for the motor and the head. But I think if we're careful, put a couple of screws, I'm hoping we can lift the mechanism out, and we may be able to get to that second belt without desoldering anything. I could be wrong, of course, but we'll try our hand, shall we? So to that end, we'll just remove the screws holding the mechanism in place, of which there are 1, 2, and 3. They're not really wanting to come out very easily. They're unscrewing okay, but they're not wanting to come out. So I'm gonna get some tweezers, I think, just to try and help them out. So with the 3 screws, 2 long ones there and 1 short one in the back corner, I'm hopeful that we can get the mechanism out. Might have been easier to have removed the cassette first, but anyway, there we go. Okay, and so the board and everything is still attached to itself. We've still got the boards attached to the door, of course, because that's the graphic equalizer. But here's the mechanism, so we can get to that at least. Okay, all the gears look in good condition, to be fair. The head's going to be super clean, super easy to get to, as is the capstan and the pinch roller. So that's going to be a nice little job in a minute. But yeah, the second belt is actually running. Yeah, it's a little drive belt that runs, don't know if you can see, but it actually runs to, that's it just there. And that's what's turning this cog. But the other side of it is actually driven by the underside of the flywheel. And you can probably just make out the belt just there. So it looks like we've got to actually now potentially remove these 3 screws. And we've got an assortment of springs and things as well. Yeah, I'm even hesitating. I'm trying to see whether or not we would be able to remove just the capstan and pull the actual belt through, but it looks like it's got to actually come away. In the absence of an instruction book on how to do this, I may find myself going in and actually taking this top plate off. I can't see any other way. Realistically, there's no clearance the other side of that cog, so it looks like this whole thing either has to come away, or we remove the capstan and still have to pop this cog off anyway, which might be an option potentially. So I'm just going to see whether or not indeed I can get one little split washer there, very tiny, tiniest little washer. I mean, that's if you can see that, let me just have a look. Just there, there's nothing to it, nothing to that at all. So we'll just put that to one side. Now we may be able to get this cog out. Okay, well that may have helped, it may not, we'll find out in a minute. Let's try it. I reckon we've got this. So, retrieve the belt from this side. Then what does it do? So it wants to come through here. But it looks like it's all split, to be honest. Yeah, it's still caught within there, so I think there's nothing for it. We're going to have to just bite the bullet and see if we can get this thing apart. So 3 screws. Whoops, trying to film and do that simultaneously. So we've got 1, this will go one way or the other. Watch out for these springs now. Probably should have undone them first. But anyway, there's the 3 screws. And I'm hoping if we just get this spring off here. There's that one. Okay. So that gets us to the other belt. All seems like a lot of fuss. But anyway, this is the belt that's blatantly been slipping. This is the one that was bad. Looked like it'd actually come off its roller as well. So I'm going to go and see if I can find another one the same size, because it's all a bit blind working underneath that lot. Well, the belt that came off, I thought it had slipped out of the pulley, but it looks like actually it was way too big, I think, for the purpose. I think it was probably the incorrect one in the first place. So I'm actually going to try, if I can, that is, to actually put all this back in without getting grease over everything. Really quite a tricky little operation, to be honest. So I very gingerly overlaid the belt onto the pulley underneath here and wrapped it around the underside of the flywheel, because the diameter is so much smaller than the top of the flywheel, and I had to kind of stretch it back in and line the cogs back up as we go. So I've now got one of the screws in. Bit of a fiddly little operation, to be honest, but I think we're getting there. So well, that's screw lined up nicely. And finally, the third one. Okay, so that's back in. If I turn the flywheel, the mechanism does appear to be working correctly. Everything's back on its cogs. The only one that's not at the moment is just here. So we'll drop him in. There he is on his locator. And finally, of course, the washer. Little split washer, the smallest washer in the world. Try and put that on. This is where it all gets a bit chaotic now. Trying to get this on here without losing it. Yep, that's on, that's retained. Sorry, I couldn't really, I had to go quiet then, concentrating a bit, but that should be on there now. And as I spin the flywheel, so the mechanisms appear at least to be working. Good, right, that's that bit. I'm going to chance my arm now and just clean the head and the capstan anyway. Got nothing to lose. It's either kill or cure, isn't it now? So we'll just clean the head with some IPA, and we'll clean the capstan. Of course, there was no spring then. I've just remembered I'm missing a spring, because we've got one small spring there to reattach in a second as well. So we'll do all that, and we'll just clean the pinch wheel. Yeah, a bit of stuff come off of that, not too bad. Right, I'm just going to go ahead and get this spring back on this mechanism very quickly. Love these fiddly little jobs. So we just attach the spring here for the mechanism, so hopefully, yep, that's the one that actually gets stretched, of course, when you press play. So that's now working nicely. Good. Right then, I think the next thing you want to do is try and put the thing together, I guess, see if it works. Okay, so we're going to try and put all this back together in the correct order. So we'll just very carefully drop the mechanism in. I'm just lining up the first 2 screws there, so that we know the third one will go in the right place, which is down here. Okay, next little job, circuit board back in, making sure that the battery contacts slide into these tiny little gaps to make sure they're properly located, like so. There we go. And then that allows also for the correct routing of the original cables and tape and everything else. We'll sort that in a minute. Right, so let's just get the ground wire back onto the motor, which is just here. And the circuit board screw itself, just the one mounting screw for the circuit board with the washer just there. Well, I'm hopeful that'll do the job. So we'll get the batteries in, I think, and give it a go. Here we go. Okay, well, it's playing nicely. Stop, fast forward, stop, rewind. Okay, well, let's yep, okay, good. Right, so what we'll do, I think, is actually get this back together and give it a proper trial. So we've had some real fun with this in the end. It's taken a bit longer than expected. Put it all back together, and because of the let's say less than amazing build quality, the power leads to the motor actually came away. To have resoldered those, put it all back together, and then it wouldn't work. It turns out, of course, the not that I can get to it now, but the play switch is actually mounted on the underside of the circuit board, just in there. You might just see it actually behind the cables, behind the white cable. So you've got to be super critical with the placement for that white peg to activate the play switch. So when you remount the circuit board, you've got to put that in exactly the right place. I realised way too late that you can actually see the play switch contacts through there. I'm guessing that's a maintenance thing, just to be able to clean the contacts. But it also will help once you line everything back up, just to make sure that you've put the board back on correctly. Otherwise, you press the transport button. As I had it hooked up to the power supply there at 3 volts, and I just couldn't get anything out of it. But of course, it was just because the contact mechanism was the wrong side of those blades, so nothing was happening. So it's something to bear in mind when you're putting it all back together. And just to reiterate the point, you can just see the blades just in here, and she's just hooked up to 3 volts DC. So when I press play now, there you go, you see that? So those are the contacts being made. So there we go then, all put back together, and yep, working properly now, as it should do. I've put the original tape back on as well. That had enough sticky left on it, and it's a bit more pliable than the thick old insulation tape. So right, let's get this back together and put a tape in it. So that was slightly more awkward than anticipated. It does result sometimes in a fair bit of carnage to do these things, as you can see. We've got external power supplies, old belts, soldering irons, multimeters, magnifying glass, spare old belts. We've got isoprope, oil, tweezers, flux, beakers, all sorts of stuff. I ended up incidentally just putting another belt on and replacing the sort of outermost belt, as it were, because it was still running a bit slow. It really wasn't doing the job. So I think what had happened is the first belt was so, or the original belt I should say, was so gone so slack that even though I put one on that was marginally smaller, it still wasn't enough really to drag it along at the right speed. So I put one on that's slightly tighter as well now, so should be running fine. Anyway, I've only got this little studio here, lights against me, so I'm going to have a bit of a clean up, and tomorrow we'll give this a bit of a polish and do a reveal to see if we finally managed to get it working. Okay, it's all been put back together now, so let's just check to see if it works properly at last. So just drop a couple of batteries in real quick and hook up the headphone socket. There's a cassette in there, so let's go for it. Brilliant. Okay, so fast forward, rewind. There we go then. Never going to get the best sound quality, of course, out of these, but we just wanted to use them to check that we've got both the channels working, because if you remember, originally the volume pot was a bit crackly and it was stopping one of the channels from functioning properly. So at least that's sorted now. Good stuff. And so here it is, the Sanyo M-GP27. Lovely little unit, but this one presented with a slow playing cassette and sometimes not playing at all. Also, one of the channels didn't work properly either and had a crackly volume pot. The volume pot was easy enough to fix. We just put some switch cleaner in there and that loosened it up and allowed both the channels to come through cleanly. The problem then though, of course, was that tape was playing slowly, if at all, and 4 simple screws off the back exposed the main drive belt, and that was really easy to replace and nicely done. Only problem was that didn't really fix it, because it was actually the internal secondary belt that had also gone, and that required a bit more effort to get to, and also the connections for the motor weren't terribly well soldered onto the board at the factory, and so they became detached as well, and it all became a little bit of a nightmare just for a few minutes. But we've sorted that out, resoldered the motor connections back on, changed the secondary belts and indeed the primary belt, and finally we got it sorted. So there you go, lessons learned all round for next time, and I hope you've enjoyed it. It's a lovely little unit actually, just needed a little bit of TLC. It sounds better through the headphones, as you can imagine. Those little speakers that we use for demonstration purposes just now really don't give you the best quality sound, but suffice to say, it works wonderfully now. The EQ works well. So if you do like this video, please do subscribe and hit the notifications bell. We've got plenty more videos coming up on boomboxes, personal stereos, 8-track players, that kind of stuff. So it'd be great to have you on board. And thanks again for watching. I'll be back soon. Goodbye.